Hello, my name is Will Miller, and I'll be going over Chapter 2, the Internet and the World Wide Web, Exploring Cyberspace. First of all, connecting to the Internet, we're going to go over a few terms. The first term we're going to look at is bandwidth. Bandwidth is just an expression of how much information can be sent to and from another computer. A baseband is just a slower type of connection that allows only one signal to be sent at a time. And of course, broadband is high-speed connection. And we'll talk about this in a few more minutes, but it's things like DSL and cable internet. And, of course, there's all sorts of types. Let's move on. So how do we connect physically to the internet? Well, we can either use a wired connection like a telephone line, which is rarely used, or a high-speed line like DSL, T1, T3. Cable modem or wireless connection can be done through obviously a hotspot, or if you have a WWAN, which is a wireless wide area network, or wireless LAN. Um, both those are different types of networks, and you can connect wirelessly through that. There's different types of measurements for data transmission, and it depends on what speed you're looking at. You can measure it anywhere in bits per second. If you've got a really slow old system that, it would take forever. And in reality, that's not it's not a practical way to measure data speed. All the way up to gigabits per second if you've got an extremely fast internet connection. Most people, if you're using a residential line, you're probably going to be measuring it in megabits per second. So what's the term uploading and downloading mean? How does that play into the internet connection? Well, uploading is obviously just how fast you can send information up to a server, and downloading is how fast you can get down from a server. And most residential and even business internet has what's called asynchronous data connections, which means that they're going to connect at different speeds for uploading and downloading. For instance, most people do a lot of downloading but not much uploading, so therefore, for instance, mine, I have an 18 meg down but only 2 megs up because I don't do much uploading. There are some situations where you'd want to have a synchronous data connection, and some companies offer them just because they know that some people want to have a fast upload speed. For instance, if you're having to create videos like I am, having a fast upload speed would be very beneficial. So narrowband or dial-up modem, we've already kind of touched on this. It's low speed but inexpensive, and there's very few people that actually have a dial-up connection anymore. I think it's something like 3% of the U.S. population still uses dial-up. Telephone modems, you can read about them. That max speed of 56 kilobits per second. I can remember back whenever I used to use a dial-up modem, and I never connected at 56 kbs. I just never did. More expensive, and it's only normally offered in cities and towns, is DSL modems, T1 lines, cable modems. Those things are a little bit more expensive. Definitely worth the convenience of having them for those people that have it. However, again, you're not going to find this out in the country. There is some people out in the country that do use satellite wireless connection, like Usenet offers it, and it's two-way to an actual satellite. There's also things like wide area networks, wide area wireless networks that actually will come out and put a antenna on a specific type of antenna, a Yagi antenna. It'll actually go on top of your roof to communicate back to a tower, and that there's a two-way link built there, and they can provide fairly high-speed internet connections doing that way. It's something to keep in mind, Wi-Fi. I've run into books that says Wi-Fi does not stand for wireless fidelity. I've run into books that do. So that's what it stands for. And actually, I did a little research, and the the consortium that came up with this, they wanted it to sound like high fidelity because that had such a good reputation. So they were trying to piggyback off that whenever they first came up with this standard. And that's where Wi-Fi actually came from. So it really does not, from the research that I've done, it really does not stand for wireless fidelity. So just keep that in mind. I believe this author is probably a little incorrect on that, but he's probably more researched than I am. So who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Regardless, it's the name set for the wireless standard 802.11 by IEEE, and it normally transmits anywhere from 300 to 500 feet. And again, there's many different types. This one he's probably looking at is like wireless 802.11b, I think. There's like 5 different ones, and I never can keep them right. I think we're going to go over them either in this lecture or in the next one. But 54 megabits per second is pretty standard. Sometimes it can go all the way up to 300 depending on which generation of wireless standards you're looking at and using. Okay, so the third generation uses existing cellular cell phone systems, and it handles voice and email multimedia. Fourth generation, and this is just faster than third generation. It's specifically for internet traffic. There's no standard on it yet though, and that's why like AT&T uses LTE before LTE or something like that, and Sprint uses a different name for it because it's a different standard. So just something to keep in mind wherever you're buying and selling or transferring from one cellular company to another. The standard, if you're using a hotspot, the standard probably won't convert over. In other words, you can't take a hotspot from Verizon to AT&T probably. So an ISP is just a local, regional, or national organization that provides access to the internet for a fee. And of course, this is like Comcast, Charter, AT&T. I mean, you can probably think of several more than I can. Wireless Internet Service Provider, or WISP, is AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Wireless, Sprint, Credo. There's several of them that do the wireless internet provider, and this is where you would have probably a hotspot. And my mother uses this. She lives out in the country, and she uses Verizon. She has a Verizon hotspot. The only thing is that I think she pays $60 a month, and she has a cap of 4 gigabytes or 5 gigabytes of data. I don't remember. And I can go through. That's per month. And last time I checked, because AT&T actually started tracking this and charging for more data, and I think I run around 360 to 400 gigabytes a month. So obviously, there's a pretty humongous difference between what Verizon offers and what we have with AT&T. But then again, she can take her hotspot to the hospital with her, or to camping with her, or wherever, and as long as she's just checking her email and doing some light browsing on Facebook or something like that, not watching a lot of videos, she'll be fine. So how does the internet work? Well, the internet is basically just a huge network that connects hundreds of thousands of smaller networks. It's central to the arrangement of the client-server network, where the client is just the computer that's requesting the data. We're typically the client, by the way. And the server or host computer is just the computer supplying the data or information. So an Internet Exchange Point, or IXP, is the routing computer at a point on the internet where several connections come together. IXPs are run by private companies and allow different ISPs to exchange internet traffic. Okay, so the internet backbone is generally a high-speed, high-capacity data transmission line, usually fiber optic. It uses the newest of all technology, and the providers actually take care of these big providers like AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, CenturyLink, and Deutsche Telekom. And these are the real players in the internet. These are who really, really do. They're charged with taking care of the actual physical hardware of the internet. The internet, too, is just a cooperative of university and business education and research projects. It adds a new toll lane to the older internet to speed things up. So perhaps you might have actually seen this. If you haven't been able to download or stream a video from maybe a server computer or a host computer or a website that's running on a host computer by who knows what, and then get over on Netflix and it streams just fine, that's probably because Netflix is paying somebody a fee to stream at a faster rate on, say, AT&T's network or Verizon's network or whoever. It's about that company paying the extra fee, and of course those fees are eventually we're paying for that fee eventually. They're not in business to lose money. Handshaking and authentication, connecting to your ISP's point of presence. Handshaking is just the fastest transmission speed established, and authentication deals with making sure you have the correct password and username. Protocols, well, it's just a set of rules for a computer to follow to make sure that they electronically transmit data correctly. And the one they use on the internet is the TCP/IP, which stands for Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol. And this was created in 1978 by ARPA. So how does it actually move information from your computer to another computer? Well, it does this in packets. It actually bundles the data up in small packets and then it sends it out on the internet, and the IXPs will then just route those packets. Now, say for instance, if I'm sending a Word document, well, some of that data could take a completely different route than the rest of the data. And yet somehow through, switches, not switches, but through the IXPs, it'll come back together on the other side as a whole form and be put back together by the receiving computer once it does some error checking. Okay, so Internet Protocol address or IP address, every device has one. Each IP address is uniquely identifies that device. The address has 4 sets of numbers separated by periods. Each number is between 0 and 255. So, so how do you know what your IP address is? Well, there are several different ways you can find out, but more importantly, what kind of IP address do you have? It comes in 2 varieties. It comes as either a dynamic or a static IP address. The dynamic IP address changes or can change every time you turn a computer on, whereas a static IP address would stay the same. Now, there's reasons why they have dynamic and static IP addresses. First, let me tell you why you'd want to have a static IP address. It deals with, for instance, if you have a server, it makes it a lot easier for that server to host websites and stuff. That way, people know exactly where to go. It has a solid IP address. It's not going to change. So why then would we ever use a dynamic IP address? And that's just primarily because the sheer number of devices that are on the internet. If every device had an IP address, then we would run out of IP addresses almost immediately. And in all actuality, they've actually started to increase the number of IP addresses by allotting 2 more sets of numbers. Instead of having 4, there's actually 6 in some areas, and actually it's probably everywhere. It just depends on if your service provider has agreed to that standard yet. Anyway, so there's one thing here is that we can be tracked via our IP address. So that kind of like, wow, I'm glad I've got a dynamic IP address. Well, that safety really isn't there. And the reason why is because every carrier has to log where that IP address was and when. So they're really, it's only a little bit of safety in the fact of it's more secure, and that's it. But it doesn't mean that you can go out and do something illegal and not get caught. That doesn't happen at all. It's very, very easy to catch somebody based on their IP address. So who runs the internet? Well, this has been big. Obviously, it depends on who you talk to, but basically right now no one actually owns the internet. Now there are absolutely companies take care of the internet, the backbone and stuff like that. And without a doubt, it was created by America. It was created as an answer to exchanging data between 2 universities, and it grew on into ARPANET, which was also used by the U.S. military. Currently, ICANN is in charge of regulating domain names like www.yahoo.com. They are the ones who actually registers yahoo.com and make sure nobody else can get yahoo.com. They're also the ones that, determine or you would register which IP address is for that name. So that way you don't have to type in the actual IP address. All you have to do is type in the name. So it kind of says it's equivalent to saying I could give you my address, or you could just go to Will Miller's house. And if you know Will Miller, then you don't have to type in his address into your GPS. The World Wide Web. So the World Wide Web is not the same as the internet. The internet is the actual hardware. The World Wide Web is a set of protocols that is software that rests on top of that hardware, that runs on the hardware. So, and this is another little bit of confusion, is that was actually developed in Europe at CERN. So there's, that's just a little difference on how the internet and the World Wide Web has developed together and who's responsible for what. It's almost open source at this point, but not quite. And open source means that just anybody can contribute. Well, not quite, because you have ICANN in there and you have IEEE in there, and there's a lot of different organizations that have a lot at stake there. And a browser is just a piece of software that allows you to interact with websites and can read this HTML, which is really the language of HTML, and HTML5 is really the language of the World Wide Web. That's the language that web pages are written in, and there's a few other languages that browsers can read as well, or at least they can use plugins that can read that language. So what's a website? This is just a location on a particular computer or server that has a unique address, for instance, www.barnesandnobles.com or McGraw-Hill. A website or server could be anywhere. You might be connecting to one that's next door. You might be connecting to one that's in Australia. You really don't know. A web page is just a document on the web that can include text, pictures, sound, and video. The first page on a website is called the home page, and you guys can read through this. This isn't too terribly hard. The Uniform Resource Locator is just the address for a web page. It's just a string of characters that points to a specific piece of information anywhere on the web. It's unique to that website, and it normally consists of the following. You have the protocol, HTTP, and then the domain name, the directory name, and the file document name and extension. And what's interesting is whenever you're creating these pages, you're normally interacting on a server, and it's literally the exact same type of file structure as what you would encounter on your computer. You have folders, and inside those folders you can put files, and inside those files is what you're actually typing out. So okay, so TCP/IP has already been explained. HTTP is the protocol used to access the World Wide Web. So what is HTML? Well, it's a markup language. So you would have things on there like how to bold letters, and how to make them italics, and make links, stuff like that. And that HTML tells exactly how all that's done. And of course, whenever you make a link, that's called a hypertext link. This is an example of a hypertext link. Web browsers interpret HTML and allow you to move around on the internet. And here you can see some elements, some basic elements of a web browser. This is Internet Explorer. So what's a search engine? Well, it's just a compiled list of keywords and terms that companies like Google and Yahoo, and there's a bunch of them that's compiled that basically links those key terms with links with websites, so you can quickly search through them. Subject directories are also lists of websites, but these are created and maintained by human editors instead of, like, for instance, search engines that use things called spiders that go through there and look through each individual web page for these key terms. Are normally in the headers of the web page, which is just a portion of the web page that says these are some key terms that whenever people search for it, I want you to grab my web page. So whereas a directory is something that human editors go in and look at web pages and decide this is where this web page belongs at this location on this in this directory. So it allows you to search for information by selecting lists of categories. An example would be, well, you guys can read the examples. A meta search engine just allows you to search several search engines like WebCrawler, Metacrawler. Specialized search engines are things like WebMD, Expedia, that allows you to really, go into a specific category and search just that category. So what is a wiki? You might have heard of these. Well, a wiki is just a small piece of software that allows you, that can be downloaded for free and used to make websites. and this is something that that doesn't necessarily have to be downloaded. Actually, they can be hosted online where you can go in and create your own wiki, and I think wiki.com does it if I remember right. Wikipedia is a free online encyclopedia that anyone around the world can contribute to or edit. It has more than 25 million articles. And you guys know that this is great for looking up really quick information. But as you well know, and I'm sure every one of your instructors have said, this is not a peer-reviewed site, so don't use it for citing articles for a research project. You will get laughed at on that one. Please don't do that on a research paper anywhere. Email, instant messaging, and other ways of communication over the internet. A couple of terms that you need to know is SMTP and POP3, and what you really need to know is that whenever you're setting up an email, it's going to ask you for your outgoing mail and your incoming mail credentials, and a lot of times that's going to be the simple mail transfer protocol, and that you're going to get that from whoever's hosting your email server. And then your incoming mail, which is normally a POP3. Now there's other types. I know that Microsoft has their own type, and there's a few others out there, so just be aware of that. But those are the two most popular types of protocols whenever dealing with email. So there's two ways to send and receive. There's just a regular email program like Outlook and Thunderbird, if you're familiar with Mozilla. And then there's some web-based ones like Yahoo Mail and Gmail, and I'm sure there's a bunch of others. And there's benefits to both. Normally, like Outlook has a lot more abilities to format and to also go through and check grammar and check spelling is going to be a lot more thorough. Web-based mail, I've always felt more safe using web-based mail than I ever did Outlook. However, you'll find, I think this book even says it's safer to use Outlook. However, I don't believe that, because I believe it's much better for me to open something up on somebody else's server than on my computer. Email attachments is just a copy of a file or document that you send attached to an email. A recipient must have compatible software, and that's why you've seen that Adobe PDF has grown, and everybody exchanges most files through PDF simply because most people, it's a free piece of software, number one, and most people have it installed on their computer from the very beginning. Net etiquette, appropriate online behavior. If you're sending out emails, this is kind of where this is why this is put in here, is just don't waste people's times. Don't make it overly wordy. Don't write anything that you wouldn't say to the person. You guys can read these as well as I can say them. My mother is horrible about shouting all her emails. She's gotten better in the last few years, but she just hit the caps lock button and would start typing, and she had no idea what that was really, in the internet culture, what that means. That means you're mad. That means you're telling somebody, something, and you really want them to listen. And then, changing the colors of the words, that kind of, in some situations, kind of just comes off a little bit tacky. So they call it flaming. I've never heard it use that term, but I've seen where some people will just go through there and highlight a word, or will change a sentence just to really emphasize that sentence. And the main thing that you want to keep on emails is professional, and be extremely careful with jokes, because one thing you cannot do is monitor tone through anything written. Especially on maybe there's some way to do it, and I'm not aware of it, but it's been my experience that tone is very hard to set on instant messaging or email or text. It's very, very difficult to set. So just be careful with that. Avoid sloppiness. Avoid criticizing people on the internet, or not on the internet, but obviously on the internet too, but on email. That can come back and get you. I made the mistake, and I had become very good friends with an assistant principal, and we were, I was going up and talking to him in the afternoon, and there was a particular student that I was having a lot of difficulty with, and he knew it, and because I talked to him a bunch about it, and for whatever reason, I just decided during class to send him an email, just kind of blowing off steam. And I mean, I really let loose on this kid. I didn't say anything inappropriate, but I just really let loose on it. And the principal said, you know what? I think it's time we have a sit down with the parent. And I was like, that sounds good. And he says, well, he'll be here this afternoon. Just come up after school. So I went up there after school, and the principal started reading the email off. And I was so mortified that he did this. However, what I didn't realize, and I do now, and that's why I very seldom like to send emails, is that became public, not public record, but that became part of that student's record where the parent could get to it and was actually lawfully able to read it anytime he wanted to anyway. So the principal was really he knew the parents, and I think there was like a little back lesson in there saying, hey, Will, if you got to be careful what you write down here because it's going to come back and haunt you. And the parents were very gracious about it. And, really what came out of it was there was a lot of frustrations on my part and a lot of frustrations on the kid's part. And we ended up working together and figuring it all out. That was probably 10 years ago or so. So, just be careful about what you say. That's the gist of it. Okay, so instant messaging, and this just enables you to communicate by email with any specific or with a specific user or other users in real time. So I don't believe this first statement that the author makes here is any user on a given email system can send a message and have it pop up instantly on the screen of anyone logged into the system. I don't necessarily believe that because I'm using an email system that no, I couldn't send an email to them and it'll pop up. It just doesn't work that way. However, whenever you take the instant messenger, for instance, AOL or AIM Instant Messenger or Google Chat, then yeah, it will pop up instantly. And it works very similar to email in that you're using some of the same protocols to make it work. Something to keep in mind is it's the same as the email, is that anything you type can be saved, copy and pasted, or just saved directly and be used later, either against you or for you, so just be careful. Okay, so FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, this is just a standard that allows you to upload documents to a web server someplace. That's the gist of what FTP really can do. There's several different types. There's Fetch, Qt, FileZilla, and SmartFTP, and of those I've used FileZilla and SmartFTP, and they work really well. There are some things that you need to know before you use them, stuff like what the email address, passwords, stuff like that. Not email address, I'm sorry, the web address, passwords, usernames, stuff like that. So let's talk about telephony, multimedia, webcasting, blogs. Obviously the title is, I'm trying to avoid saying this, the online gold mine. So there we go. So telephony, the internet phone, telephone. So if you've never heard of voice over IP, that's what VoIP stands for. And it's, it's really cool what it can do. And whenever about 10, 12 years ago, I moved, actually it's been closer to 15 years ago, I moved from Fort Worth to Weatherford. Well, Weatherford if you call out to Weatherford, it's long distance. And all my friends were in Fort Worth or in this, generally, this very general local area right here. Very few of them lived out in Weatherford. So I decided I really wanted to have a local Fort Worth number because I didn't want to be calling long distance every time I made a phone call. Well, that's whenever I found out about Vonage, which is still in business. You can see it's right down here. And I could actually get a voice over IP call or a phone with a local number. In fact, I could port my number. I think I was able to port my number over to it so that I could keep that same phone number. About maybe a year after I had it, and it was working great out in Weatherford, my wife, who was my girlfriend then, her family got to take a family vacation out to Italy. And it was going to be like a 10-day vacation, and I really didn't want to go 10 days without talking to them, and I knew that it was going to cost too much for them to call from Italy over to America, and by that point I had a cell phone. So I told them to take my voice over IP, my Vonage box, and a regular phone, and I said, anytime you see a network connection, just plug it in and see if you can call people. And they got over to Italy, and I think they went to several different hotels, but there was 3 of them that did have that network connection, and they ended up able to call a lot of people, and you couldn't tell any difference. I think there was a little bit more lag, but other than that, you couldn't tell the difference. It was high quality and it was great. So those are the things that, obviously voice over IP has some really big pluses to it if you need it. And of course, I'm well aware, like myself, a lot of people just went straight to cell phones now, and that's what we've got here at our house. However, we're in a dead spot. So we actually had to buy a box that communicates. It's basically like a little cell tower. It's called a microcell tower, but so it acts like a cell site. However, from that microcell tower, it has a network cable that goes back into our internet, goes back into our router, and it's actually using voice over IP. So all these years, we've still used voice over IP. It's pretty cool. Okay, so multimedia on the web. This just allows you to get images, sound, video, and animation. It may require a plugin or a viewer. So some examples that would allow you to use multimedia on the web are like Flash, Real Player, and QuickTime. And I'm very aware that Flash is something that has some huge security issues, and a lot of these have some security issues, and you have to be careful with them. Multimedia applets are just small programs that can be quickly downloaded and run by most browsers. Java is the most common one, and again, you got to be careful with any of these plugins because they can be exploited, and you can have viruses and all sorts of things put into them. If you haven't had a chance to play around with Google Earth, you should do that. It's a really cool program. Let's move on. Okay, so animation is just the rapid sequencing of still images. And if you've ever seen a GIF image, and it's like, the extension is GIF, that's why they're called GIF images. That's what they do, is they just take and they use the old idea of a flip book, but they have images that just move. It's used a lot in video games. Now, GIF images aren't, but obviously animation is used a lot in video games. GIFs are actually used a lot in web images, so just keep that in mind. It's used a lot in banners and stuff like that because they're very, very small files, and that's what you want is a small file so that it can be downloaded quickly. So how does computers handle videos and audio? Well, there's two types. That you can either download it completely before you watch it, or you can stream it. So, and it really depends on what the need is. If you want it left on the local machine, then you'd want to download it. If you want to, if it's like a Netflix video, then you're going to stream it more than likely. And there's Hulu, Netflix, there's all sorts of streaming, Amazon Prime, there's all sorts of places that stream videos and audio. Push technology is just software that automatically downloads information to personal computers. Webcasting, sending users customized text, video, audio, or on a regular basis. And RSS, which stands for Real Simple Syndication, is just a program that scours the web, sometimes hourly, sometimes more frequently, and pulls together one place that feeds from several websites so that you can view it. RSS is based on XML, or Extensive Markup Language, which is just a web document tagging and formatting language that is advanced over HTML. And let's move on. A blog is just a web log. Frequently updated sites on the web intended for public consumption. If you've ever watched Julia versus Julia, I think it's Julia versus Julia, or maybe it's Julia and Julia. The lady that's going through and cooking all of Julia Child's dinners or meals, whatever you want to call it, recipes. There we go. She actually keeps a web log of how it turned out and what happened. Podcasting, internet radio, or similar internet audio program delivered by an RSS feed. So e-commerce is just electronic commerce, and it's conducting business activities, and there's several different types. There's business to business, business to consumer, and consumer to consumer, and there's even more than that. Business to business is like Office Depot selling a ream of paper to my wife's boss. Business to consumer is like Office Depot selling a pen to me, and consumer to consumer would be like me going to eBay or Craigslist and buying something off those websites. Okay, so I want to come back and I want to talk to you about showrooming for a second. Showrooming is just the phenomenon in which shoppers browse for products in stores only to buy them from an online rival, frequently at a lower price. And, I would be lying to say I've never done this. I've done this several times. But what's interesting, so this is like, just stepping back again, I almost forgot this. This is like me going in and looking for a toy for my daughter, scanning it with the Amazon app, which you can do, and looking at it and seeing if it's any cheaper on Amazon.com. If it is, then I could buy it on Amazon.com. But what's interesting is that some of the big box stores like Target is now matching the price of what Amazon.com does. So I could literally take that same barcode or that same image that I found on Amazon, take it up to the front desk at Target, and they would match that price, which is just, it's phenomenal. But it has to be obviously the exact same product. Okay, so Web 2.0 just refers to the web viewed as a medium in which an interactive experience can occur. This can occur in the form of a blog, social networking. You guys can read these. The move toward a more social, collaborative, interactive, and responsive network has led to a social web, giving rise to, of course, social networking sites, media sharing sites, and social networking aggregators. So let's move on to Web 3.0. So what does that mean? Well, this is where we move to what's called the semantic web, which is the personal browser. In other words, the browser is now feeding information into us based on what it thinks that we'll like. So it's kind of that understanding of the knowledge itself. It's kind of interesting. Google Now does this, and there's several other things I think probably, and I don't have an iPhone. My wife has an iPhone, and I think that there's something that iPhone does this. And of course, you can sign up for news groups not news groups, but I have a news app that does this on my phone that kind of knows by what I look at and how long I look at it. It knows, oh, that's this type of article, and it's going to go out and fetch it for me. The intrusive internet, snooping, spamming, spoofing, phishing, farming, cookies, spyware, and malware. Boy, that's just a list of words that 30 years ago they'd be like, what are you talking about? But, in this day and age, we know what some of those words mean without even me going over it. Snooping is just, you got to keep in mind, email is not private. Corporate management has the right to view employees' email. And for instance, as soon as I put Fort Worth ISD's email on my phone, that gives Fort Worth, I've signed off that Fort Worth ISD has the ability to erase my phone and view its entire content. So you really got to look at the user agreements whenever you start, saying, yeah, I want my email read on my, or put on my phone from your corporate account. Friends can send email anywhere, and not all ISPs protect their customers' rights and privacy. Deleted emails can still be retrieved from a hard disk, and you got to remember that emails are always saved in 4 different locations. It's saved on the user's computer, on the sender's computer, on the sender's server, the email server, on the receiver's email server, and also on the receiver's computer. So there's 4 different locations that email can go. Okay, so spam is just electronic junk mail. Which is just unsolicited email. Don't open it up. Just delete it as soon as you get it. Don't click any links. When you sign up for something, don't give your real email address. Always give a fake one. Always have a fake one. Use spam filters. This is one of the cool things about a lot of the modern emails, especially the ones that are web-based, is they do have folders. They can just send it on into it, and that way you can check it to make sure that it wasn't a real email sometimes. Fight spam. You can go to these 2 email addresses and actually report spamming. Spoofing is just using a fake email sender's name. So the message appears to be from a different source, and this is actually very easy to do, so just be aware of it. Phishing, just sending forged emails directing recipients to a fake website. The purpose is to entice people to share personal or financial data, so always be on the lookout for that. Farming, just implanting malicious software on a victim's computer that redirects the user to an imposter web page. So, for instance, you might be thinking you're typing in www.google.com, but it's going to take you to a whole other web page, so it's collecting information off of you. For instance, you might be thinking you're going to your bank's webpage, which would be just horrible, but it can happen. I mean, the purpose is for them to make money, and that would be a easy way for them to do it. So just be careful of that. Cookies, cookies have kind of a little bit of a rough history. They had a noble start, and it was just supposed to make it easy for you to not have to give all your credentials and whatever else you want, or whatever else that you want that website to keep. But what it ended up to be kind of known for is tracking people. So like it could kind of track to see if you were on this web page, how long you were on that web page. So sometimes you might not, depending on the website, you might not want that website to track you. So you can always go in and go into some advanced privacy settings and disable tracking. Spyware is just software that is installed on your computer via the web, and it hides on your PC and captures information about what it's doing, like keystrokes and passwords, which is different than, just to let you know, if you're at TCC, the teacher does have the ability to start what's called a keylogger. And if you don't know what a keylogger does, all it does is just log all your keystrokes to see what you're typing in there. They can also obviously see what you're looking at on your screen, and they can also look at your web browser history and what programs you've used. Again, that's not spyware. That's actually something that is on all the machines that we have in the labs for computer science and BCIS anyway, at least the ones that I've been familiar with. And it's there primarily to help us track to see if there's any cheating going on or any activity that wouldn't be appropriate. Okay, adware or pop-up generator is a kind of spyware that tracks web surfing or online buying so that marketers can send you targeted and unsolicited pop-ups and other ads. Browser hijackers just change settings in your browser without your knowledge, often changing your browser's home page and replacing it with another page, which can be really, really rough. It's hard to change that back, and a lot of times it's very virus-like, and I mean it actually is a virus. Search hijackers just intercept your legitimate search request made to a real search engine, and return results from a phony search engine service designed to send you to sites they run. Keyloggers, I've already talked about keyloggers. So malware is just malicious software. A common type is called a virus, which is just a rogue program that migrates through the internet via operating systems and attaches itself to different programs that spread it from one computer to another. The principal defense is, of course, antivirus or antivirus software. Also, just being careful of what you do is probably the best antidote to viruses. Just being very, very aware of if you're using a flash drive, what computer you're putting it in. Do you trust this person? If you're opening up a document, do you trust this person? Stuff like that. So how do you reduce malware risks? Well, obviously, having a good antivirus. Scanning your system pretty regularly. Don't open or download it or execute any programs you don't know where they're coming from. You guys can read through this. This is a pretty exhaustive list. Passwords. Passwords are a big deal. Just think, how many people's passwords do you know right now? And I bet you know at least 2 or 3 or more. And I know I do. I was never so surprised as whenever a principal gave me their password. And I was like, why are you, in my head, I thought I was a technology coordinator, and I knew if I liked my job, I shouldn't do anything. But I thought, you have just given me a huge amount of power and you shouldn't do this. But, she's my boss and I can't tell her that. And it was years and years ago. It's not the boss that I have now. Just be careful with it. Don't choose numbers that, have anything to do with your social security number, license plate, anything that they can guess from having a conversation with you. There's a lot of people out there that use social engineering to record conversations that they have with you, and then actually play it back later and use those words, once they find out what's important to you, who's important to you, what dates are important to you, they'll use combinations of that and to try to brute strength your password based on just those conversations. Don't use things like 1 2 3 4 5 as your password. I think that the most popular password is password. Don't use that. Avoid any words that appear in a dictionary. Instead, mix the numbers and the words together. Add some punctuation. Make it a little oddball, but at the same time, like I always kind of keep the same format with mine, but it's a very randomized format to where I can remember it, but other people would be like, "How did you come up with that?" And of course, I'm not going to tell them. And you guys can read through these, and there's other ways to keep your passwords safe. For goodness sakes, don't write your passwords down. Don't even write your usernames down if you can keep from it. I bought my mom a computer, many years ago, and I went back to check on it about 6 months later, and she had some tape on her laptop, which didn't make me happy, but I'd given it to her. But what really didn't make me happy is on that tape, she put down every one of your usernames and passwords. And I was like, Mom, you cannot do this. If somebody comes in and steals this computer, they've not only stole your computer, they've stole everything on every one of these websites. And unfortunately, one of them was her bank account number. And I was like, oh, don't give your bank account information out like that. Okay, well, that finishes up chapter 2, and I hope you learned something. Have a good day.